Defendant Donald Trump's motion to renew is, quote, a vexatious and frivolous attempt to relitigate an issue that was twice addressed by this court in orders that the First Department Appellate Division then refused to disturb. This was filed moments ago by the Manhattan District Attorney's Office in the criminal case against Donald Trump, where Trump was already convicted on 34 separate felony counts, where Donald Trump filed a letter motion requesting that Justice Merchan, who presided over the case, now recuse himself, remove himself from the case before sentencing is set to take place in September. And Donald Trump argues because of a relationship between Justice Merchan and Vice President Kamala Harris. Donald Trump roots that in deranged and unhinged conspiracies from his top surrogates like Laura Loomer. First, let me show you Donald Trump's very bizarre motion that he filed. This is as Donald Trump gets more desperate as his poll numbers crater, as Vice President Kamala Harris surges ahead. Here's what Donald Trump put in his motion, as Tyler McBrien says. This is Trump's team renewing its recusal request in light of the long-standing and extremely beneficial working relationship between Merchan's daughter and Vice President Kamala Harris, who recently became the presumptive Democrat nominee. Here is the letter from the convicted felon's lawyer, Todd Blanche. I'm just going to summarize it for you, but I want to read some of the language so you can hear how absurd it is for yourself. Donald Trump's lawyer, Todd Blanche, or I should say the convicted felon's lawyer, Todd Blanche, writes the following. Dear Justice Merchan, in light of the long-standing and extremely beneficial working relationship between Your Honor's daughter and Vice President Kamala Harris, who recently became the presumptive presidential nominee of the Democrat Party, we respectfully submit this pre-motion letter to renew our request that the court recuse itself. This letter can be deemed the motion, and we request permission to file a reply. Trump's lawyer goes on to say, Trump is the Republican nominee. Harris emerged as the presumptive opponent after it became apparent to the public that Biden administration's lawfare against Trump was motivated by Biden's alarming decline. So just pause right there. That's how you lose all credibility with a judge to begin with. If you want to have facts or law to argue for a recusal, argue it. But to make an argument that isn't an argument at all, but just a press release for a very desperate and declining candidate in Donald Trump just shows that you have no position. It shows how weak and how scared you are. The letter goes on to say, Your Honor has insisted on maintaining an unconstitutional gag order. So then Trump's lawyers attack Justice Merchan. Making matters worse, this week the Biden administration unveiled an unprecedented plot to mount a political assault on the Supreme Court in response to the presidential immunity ruling that is central to Trump's pending motion. I think the Biden administration said there should not be absolute presidential immunity because presidents are not kings and no one should be above the law. 2, that there should be term limits on the Supreme Court. And 3, there should be a binding and transparent ethics guidelines that they follow. But if you're saying that that is an attack on the Supreme Court, you're pretty much revealing that you are okay with the idea of dictatorships and lawless courts. By the way, it should be noted that all of those, reforms that were proposed by President Biden are not inconsistent with actually what conservative scholars before Republicans became a full-fledged cult believed should take place with the Supreme Court, namely the term limits and ethics guidelines, and who would ever suspect before Donald Trump and this right-wing Supreme Court went full MAGA that there would be the concept of absolute immunity where you can order the military to kill your political opponents. So there's more whining here in this paragraph by Trump's lawyer. And then it talks about the judge's daughter and then insults the judge and the judge's daughter. Your Honor's daughter has a long-standing relationship with Harris, including work for political campaigns. She has obtained and stands to obtain in the future extensive financial, professional, and personal benefits from her relationship with Harris. Your Honor's daughter was publicly critical of Trump's use of Twitter, a central issue in the pending immunity motion, and described a discussion on that topic with Your Honor that evidences prejudgment of Trump's official acts argument. Your Honor's daughter is a part owner and executive at Authentic Campaigns, which was the top vendor for Harris's prior presidential campaign, based on disbursements of nearly $5 million too. Touted its subsequent work for the Biden-Harris campaign in connection with at least the 2020 election, and 3, made tens of millions of dollars by helping other politicians disseminate political advertisements based on this case. I'm just trying to understand this argument. So, it's an attack on the United States Supreme Court to request term limits, where Donald Trump's own hand-picked judges declared that Trump is above the law. But now you are saying the fact that Justice Merchan has a daughter and his daughter has a job where she works in politics is grounds to disqualify the judge. The judge should be bound by his daughter's job. I'm trying to follow the argument here. So, by the way, was the judge who previously denied this same exact recusal request, and so is the district attorney's office. So when I'm not covering politics here on the MeidasTouch network, where do I get my news on issues involving business, climate, entertainment, culture, music? I go to the Washington Post, and one of my favorite things about the Washington Post is I've signed up for their For You newsletter, which sends me my very own personalized roundup of stories every evening based on my interest and reading history. And their Washington Post app makes it easy for me to stay up on the latest news, save and share stories, and follow my favorite authors on all of the topics that I want to have curated for me. That's why I really love the Washington Post. And look, with the election rapidly approaching and with all the issues both here and abroad, now is the time to sign up for the Washington Post. The Washington Post sponsors the MeidasTouch podcast. So go to washingtonpost.com/Meidas to subscribe for just 50 cents per week for your first year. That's 80% off their typical offer. So this is truly a steal. Once again, go to washingtonpost.com/Meidas to subscribe for just 50 cents per week for your first year. Check it out. Here's the letter by the district attorney's office. They say, "Dear Justice Merchan, this letter responds to defendant Donald Trump's motion to renew his 2 prior motions for recusal that he lost." And then it goes on to say, defendant's motion to renew is vexatious and frivolous. It's a vexatious and frivolous attempt to relitigate an issue that was twice addressed by this court in orders that the appellate division, the first department, refused to disturb, meaning the Court of Appeals said, go away, Donald, as well. Defendant Donald Trump identifies no new facts or changes in the law that warrant a different outcome. He appears to base his motion on the fact that Vice President Harris is now the candidate for president rather than vice president, but defendant's earlier motions already argued that the vice president was his political opponent and that the court's family member would therefore purportedly benefit somehow from rulings in this case. Indeed, defendant rests his latest motion on the same exact affirmation or declaration he presented in support of his April 3rd motion. The regurgitated showing does not come close to meeting the standard to renew. On the merits, the court already correctly held that the speculative series of claims in defendant's April 3rd motion and affirmation do not even remotely establish that the court has a direct personal, substantial, or pecuniary interest in reaching a particular conclusion. The first department dismissed defendant's challenge to those orders, holding he had not established a right to recusal or that this court acted in excess of its jurisdiction. No amount of overheated, hyperbolic rhetoric can cure the fatal defects in defendants' ongoing efforts to impugn the fairness of these proceedings and the impartiality of this court. This motion for recusal should be denied for the third time. You see Donald Trump getting very, very desperate with these filings. He knows that in September, there's going to be a sentencing, and Donald Trump could be sentenced to prison in September by Justice Merchan. Justice Merchan has been very fair in his rulings. He even extended, you'll recall, what was supposed to happen was the sentencing was supposed to happen on July 10th. Following the Supreme Court's ruling, Donald Trump petitioned to Justice Merchan that Trump wanted to file an absolute immunity brief, arguing that the case, the trial where Trump was convicted, should be dismissed because Trump says evidence of official acts while he was in the White House should have been excluded from the trial. Justice Merchan said, look, I will entertain the arguments. We will set a briefing schedule. Justice Merchan moved back the sentencing. Not enough for Donald Trump. Donald Trump says, I want you gone, Justice Merchan, because of your daughter, and proceeds to attack Justice Merchan's daughter with speculative garbage and conspiracy theories. So there you have it. Very desperate Donald Trump in the courts and on his social media and across the board. Hit subscribe. Let's get to 3 million together. Thank you for watching.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Midas by signing up to the MeidasTouch newsletter at MeidasTouch.com/newsletter.